What's cracking, people? It's your man Cousin T, aka the Alpha Wing Man, representing high-level technicians, operating globally and beyond. So listen, today I wanted to go into part 2 of the series, the female group hierarchy, or the Fegh. And just a quick review, on page 41 of the book, the Seduction Scriptures, I break down what the female group hierarchy is and how it displays itself, and various areas of activity, and it cuts across cultures, it cuts across socioeconomic boundaries. It's in the professional workplace, it's in the social circles, and basically it starts with the queen bee, who is, the one with the highest social IQ, usually the most attractive, can get the majority of the men vying for her attention. Then beneath her you have the top mistress, who's usually her best friend or close associate. She is the one who blocks or maintains the structure of the lower levels of the female group hierarchy, which includes the bottom mistress, who and just to be clear, to make it easier when we do graphics, I assign numbers. Okay, so number 1 is obviously the queen bee, number 2 would be the top mistress, number 3 would be the bottom mistress, and she's the one who is sort of the dark horse within the group. She could go either way. She usually has some sort of past, and she's trying to elevate her social status by ingratiating herself or coming under the direction of a particular female group hierarchy. Then you have number 4, aka the submistress. She's usually the least attractive of the group. She's the mother hen, she's the boisterous one, usually the life of the party, well outspoken. She plays defense, the external enforcer of the group. So I've given various examples of that in part 1, and I'll link part 1 in the description. But what I want to do is sort of a case study in modern culture, or modern Western culture, and that is of the Kardashian family. And just as a side note, there's a section in the book, The Seduction Scriptures, where I'm going over the various levels of attraction, sort of what the sexual market value ranking structure is, very general. This is on page, or at least starts on page 110 of the Seduction Scriptures, and it continues on page 111. But for the sake of this podcast, we're going to focus on the second verse of page 110. And basically, this is the sort of standard of the hot, quote-unquote, Western, and also continuously expanding globally woman. So this is what my definition, according to the Seduction Scriptures, of the hot woman, or the 10 or the dime piece is. So for the most part, she has somewhat exaggerated and often enhanced features such as saucer-like and smoky browed eyes, pouty lips, airbrushed skin, a tapered waist, and a curvy to fat ass. Pretty much varying shades of the Kardashian Jenner motif. Now, I'm going to finish this part because it plays into an up-and-coming video that I'll have, that gives a third dimension to what the would-be seducer, or the modern man who's looking to amplify his skill sets, would see in a woman. So, and this is a little tangent, but it's necessary. Most men, when they look at women, they already have an ideal in their mind, and so with that ideal comes just a singular, one-dimensional perspective of women, and more specifically the type of women that he desires, to have whatever type of relationship or liaisons with. The goal of the masculine master is to have at least a three-dimensional perspective of a woman. So we're starting with the female group hierarchy and where she ranks within that structure. We're covering one aspect of the sexual market value, meaning what her attractiveness, her desirability is on a scale of 10 maybe to 5. Third, which will be covered in another podcast, will be what her Octane rating is. Shout out to Master Teacher BGS at IBMOR. You do not want to miss that series. It is definitely going to provide some valuable insight, and there are going to be some surprising elements. And I guarantee that some people won't be surprised because the people who are in the know, they know. But for the general public, they will be surprised to see some aspects of what will be presented. So stay tuned for that. But basically, to finish in verse 2, it says, according to the Master Teacher BGS, IBMOR's Octane scale, which is referenced in Close 302 verse 5, the 100 octanes would rate at either a 10 or 9 on the S&B scale. However, this is only for a limited window of time until her youth, beauty, and perceived innocence fades. So, with that in mind, let's go back to the Kardashian Jenner motif. And so, as we can see here, the description of what the modern day dime generally is on full display with the Kardashian Jenner clan. And when we apply the female group hierarchy structure in this instance, it displays itself in an interesting way. Now you've got the basic elements. You've got the queen bee and Kim. Obviously, she's the queen bee of this particular structure. The top mistress is Chloe, and what's interesting is in the earlier years there was sort of a battle between Chloe and Courtney for the top mistress position, and at some point Chloe beat out Courtney, and she's held that top mistress position ever since. And so Courtney is the bottom mistress, and true to form, she's had some issues. I mean, they've all had issues, but Courtney's issues have put her in a position to whereas she's becoming estranged. And I didn't really notice until there was a premiere or some type of ad or commercial for an upcoming season, whereas I think Courtney is actually going to separate herself from the show. I don't know if it's going to be a period of time or whatever, but this is playing out exactly as how the observations for the female group hierarchy were made. And so what's interesting is the fourth position, which is the mom, Kris Kardashian. She plays the external enforcer. She plays the one who protects the group. She protects the clan, but she also is the one who sets up the value of the group in its entirety. So it's a very unique position that is being played with this particular female group hierarchy. And I had a question or a comment on the last video when I showed a preview of this particular slide. Why are there zeros over Kylie Jenner and Kendall Jenner's pictures within this particular graphic? That's actually the letter O, which represents outlier positions. Now, the outlier is defined in the Seduction scriptures. The glossary entry is on page 161 for anyone who's interested. But the outlier sort of concept is a part of the Octane scale dynamic, where you have an atypical person or personality within a group that presents themselves as a part of the whole. However, they do not fit within a prescribed position. And that's another conversation for another day. But what's interesting, what's an interesting dynamic with this particular group is that there seems to be a sort of transitioning that's happening. It looks like Chris is setting up Kylie and Kendall to have more active roles within the female group hierarchy. And so as Courtney's transitioning out, the role of Kylie and Kendall within the mix seem to be increasing. And so, and this is something that I bring out in the section that talks about the office fuck file of the book. But basically, within the structure of a female group hierarchy, there's always a battle for elevation, because obviously it's the social pyramid or the social totem pole or the food chain. And just like with any other species, there's always competition to be the fittest, right? So there are all of these dynamics playing out simultaneously within the group, but also as an orchestrated and calculated sort of bit of activity by the group leads. And so when we understand these dimensions and these dynamics within this structure, we can accurately predict what will transpire going forward. And so you don't have to be a psychic to look at just sort of casually the inner workings of this particular structure: who's in, who's out, who's moving in, who's moving out, to observe and to predict that not only will Courtney be transitioning out of the active structure, but actually Kim may be also transitioning out of the active positioning of the hierarchical structure. So that'll leave Chloe to be more active, and there will be actually a competition for the queen bee spot within the Kardashian Jenner motif and their female group hierarchy. So we can only time will tell, but we can see this play out in real time for those who bother to even casually follow the goings on of that particular family. But I just thought that was an interesting case study because all of the pieces of the female group hierarchy are present here. And so it makes for an interesting observation, especially for men who have a desire for a certain type of woman when you're out and about or when you're online. When you see women within certain structures, even at work or even in her workspace, when you're observing a woman and you want to really know sort of her thought patterns, sort of what her behavioral patterns are like. Observe how she ranks within the women in her family, within the women in her social structure, within the women in her professional space, be it in education, be it in a medical field, be it in the law field, anywhere within the corporate space. The female group hierarchy plays out, and the way in which women establish their positioning is what's going to tell you a good deal about her behavioral patterns, what her desires are, what her motivations are. And so you have that much more information in making an informed decision about the choices and the women that you deem desirable for your mission. Select men, pre-select men, non-select men. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And as always, this is your man, Cousin T, aka the Alpha Wingman, saying, stay sharp and mission focused. Later.